Hello there, it's Ina here and welcome to my art room. Thank you so much for coming to take a closer look at my journal here. Now, I had planned to have this video out to you way sooner, but right after I recorded part 1, I caught a terrible flu and it really messed with my voice. Even today, I'm still a bit squeaky, so I might have to film this in 3 or 4 parts to rest my voice so in between, but it will all in the end fit into this one video. So in part 1 I showed you how I altered the book, the spine, the cover, the pages and so on. And if you have not seen it, please go down in my description box. There will be a link you can follow. Now, I kept this book a bit in a boho style. It has lots of fibers and fabrics and lace, but otherwise it doesn't really have a theme. I just worked every day in it, just did whatever I felt like that day. So it's an odd combination of designs and techniques and mediums and so on. But it's all pretty simple. You know me, I don't do difficult, and also everything in here pretty much you have seen me do before in some of my other art journals. But if you have a question, please leave it below and I will be sure to get back to you on it. Because I will have to leave out some details, otherwise this video will just get way too long. So let me start with the cover. This is cotton fabric cover I covered in gesso. And then I colored it using my simple acrylic paints. I picked a berry color and I let the color fade out a little bit to where here on the bottom it's pretty much white. And then I added different colors with stencils, some yellow ochre, some copper, some dark gray, some white. And after that I used a really large stencil which fit all across the cover. And then I used my metallic acrylic paints in teal in 2 different shades, and that finished the painting of it. And only then did I cut out the window here, and that was easy enough to do because the indentation was very easy to feel through the fabric. I purposely cut the window a little bigger than the book because I wanted to see the edge of the book here. And you saw in my last video that I colored all the edges of the original book with the yellow ochre, and this is what you can see here. I also left a little gap here before I put back my focal point because I wanted to see the book pages through it. Alright, so after this was colored, I took it under my sewing machine. I went around the edges a couple of times, around the window a couple of times, and for no other reason that it looks cool. It does not hold anything together. But I did add a little loop over here, and I made it out of the seam binding I used for the closure. If you look really closely here, you can see how this seam binding goes underneath this cover, comes out here, goes across the whole, comes out here, and of course it goes around the back to make a closure. This is just some seam binding I colored with Glimmer Mist. It's left over from another project and just fit perfect in the color. Now for the focal point here, I took the piece of cardboard which was originally part of the book. I cut it down a few millimeters, that's how I got the gap around here. And then I covered it with some simple kitchen foil. A friend of mine embossed these for me with a clock face. I glued it to the cardboard, glued it around the edges, added some black acrylic paint, wiped it back off with a wet wipe, which leaves this distressed look. And then here in the middle I added one of my buttons. Now sometime back, a few months back, I made a video where I decorated these oversized buttons with all kinds of little doodads, and this one just fit perfectly in the color, so it became the center of my focal point, and I really like the way this looks, and yeah, I think it brings a lot of interest to the cover. So let's see. Another thing about the cover, of course, is the charm. There's a little tassel I had, it was ready-made. Oops, these are all kind of in a mess here. Okay, here we have a little red heart and a little tile. We have a silver hand. We have a piece of a broken earring with a really pretty blue stone, a little crystal, some handmade beads, a little glass turkey, and we have a little hippie heart here with a little flower on it. It's actually a bead, and another broken earring with some feathers. Different pieces of chain I had, so pretty simple. All right, onward to the first page. As you can see here, I used the yellow ochre on the underside of the fabric cover as well. And then this is of course a stack of paper I glued together at the very beginning of the book. I took the whole stack and I glued it to the inside of the original book cover. I also took the small page I had here on which I created the closure and glued it on top of it. So now I have a closure and of course a little compartment here, and it's big enough and deep enough to hold a metal key. I added a magnetic closure here. There's also a quote. It says, "Be who you are, let your life flow." And that's the only quote in this book. And then here I took the key and I attached it to a chain. The chain goes to a metallic piece here in the middle. And I added these micro beads embedded in glossy accent to fill in the center. The rest of the page is really very much mixed media style. It has some texture paste, it has some rusty and paint, it has craft paper and stamped on tissue and so on. The next page here is a collage, a lace flower and a fun fringe here at the bottom. Here this page is rather simple. I had these numbers for a while. They were printed on a craft stock and they're made to look distressed and old and vintage and have a real fun and pretty design. So I added these as they fit perfectly in size. I painted the rest of the background, rubbing off some of the paint to reveal the print. I also textured it by using an old dryer sheet and then added these stickers. Yes, the birds and the little flowers are stickers. I use stickers very rarely in my art, but these just fit so perfect in color, and hey, why not, right? There are no rules. And here you also see the beginning of my bookmark. I just took a very colorful piece of fabric, added some beads, making sure I picked the one which have a big hole so they're easy to go on the fabric. I added an extra piece of fabric at the bottom here, and of course this will go all around and you'll see the other end later. This can completely be taken out and put into a different page. Here we have a very ordinary mixed media art page, some stenciling with texture paste, some organza flowers, some die cuts, some painting. I added some crackled glaze on these figures, a lot of details. So there's that page. And that brings me to the pockets. Now I had this really lovely napkin. It fit perfect in size and design, so I glued it to both pages, and when it was really dry I took an X-Acto knife and reopened the pockets, and it really worked well, no problem. And then I added these coffee dyed pieces of lace at the edge. I did a little bit of embossing here too, just to bring out some of the design the napkin already had, and it's so pretty I didn't want to do anything else with it. It lets some of the print shine through, which I really like. And the pockets hold odds and ends. These are just leftover pieces from other projects, things I received in the mail. This piece here is the original piece, which I cut out of the front cover, and I think it was pretty enough to keep. And then I made some fabric tags. So here I just took a tag, I glued on some bits and pieces of lace and ribbon and fabric. I took some sari yarn and made this little design. I also took the sari yarn to make this up here together with a little bell. And then on the back side I took a piece from an old tie-dye scarf. It already had the fringe on the bottom, a little lace flower, and then just some crazy stitching all over the place I did with my sewing machine. There's a button and a little bling as well. So this big tag goes in here. And then on this side we have one a little bit smaller. Now this was sent to me. It's texture paste through a stencil, I believe. It has such lovely color and designs. So all I did, I cut it down to become a tag. I added some fabric to the back, sewed up the edges, added a little bling and just a little ribbon on the top. I think it's pretty just the way it is. All right, on. And here's my Steampunk page. I started by building up the background with bits and pieces of jelly plate prints. I did a lot of stenciling around here, some doodling all around here and in the middle. I added these big images which were printed on a napkin, and they have a lot of detailing going on. There's some glossy accent here and there. I added this sticker which looks like spoked bicycle wheels. And then I just rescued these two hands from an old wall clock and I attached them with the paper brad, and yes, they move in whichever way I would like them to go. And the end of this brad happened to be inside the big pocket here, and that was just a lucky coincidence, so I don't see it. And on. And here we have the diamond page. You remember I cut this out of the book? Well, I took the pieces and I sandwiched them around some cardboard to make them more sturdy. I also cut them down in size a little bit. Then reattached them just by making some holes and using a string. Then I decorated all these diamonds with leftover pieces of acrylic skin. I had done a project not so long ago and they came handy for this purpose. The background is finger painting. Yeah, I used my finger and different acrylic paints, some stamping and stenciling. Now, because I only attached this diamond on the top and on the bottom, it of course can swivel, so you have a second side to look at. Again, acrylic skin with a little snowflake. On this side, I attached this metallic sticker. It is showing a little bit of an Asian building, and it fit just perfect in the colors. And here I made some holes and inserted some sari yarn again, just for a bit more fringes and colors and fibers. Yeah. All right, next page. So here I started with just some tissue paper to work up some texture. I added lace, I added some of these textured paper hearts, some string. I covered everything in black gesso and then brought out the texture using my dry brush and metallic paint. I of course painted the heart. I added these die cut dragonflies, a little bit of micro beads here inside the string and on the hearts, and yeah, so there's that page. I think it makes it look a little bit like leather, which is kind of fun, and it feels great. So these are my vintage pages. It includes the page I cut down, and I just took a very skinny piece of ribbon which I was able to fit into a needle, made some stitching, and the end holds some metallic pieces which came off an old broken earring. I happen to have this picture of this little girl and her brother waiting at a train station. So I added it across a small page and then added all kinds of other vintage item I had in my stash. Doily, and there's a little jewel here, there's some glitter, there's some lace, and so on. Same on this side. It has a propeller over here, a motorcycle, advertisement, all vintage stuff. There's a key with a little string attached. Then there is this little pocket here made out of vintage newspaper print, and it holds some old playing cards, and they have music notes on the back. And so they fit in here. There is also half a pearl here. There are some little stickers here which look like screws and nails. And then I took this page and the next page, I took some string and a needle and just sewed it up very roughly on both edges to create a pocket. And the pocket holds another small art journal page. It has napkin on the back side, and this was actually a leftover from another art journal I had long time ago, which just didn't work out, but I kept this particular page. It was way bigger, but I was able to cut it down and make it fit into this pocket here, and it has a little tassel here again, so it's easy to pull out and go back in, and there's lots of room in there for extras too if I like. And that brings me to my triple page. Let's see if I make sure you can see it all. And that day I was into flowers, so I started with a piece of wrapping paper. It had all flowers on it. And then I did some stenciling of flowers, I did some stamping on flowers, and then some painting on flowers. Lots and lots of details on this one, from crackle glaze to liquid pearls and triple gloss and stamping and stenciling and writing, and you name it, it's all on this page. So there it is, there are my flowers. And this little page is rather simple. It's just a piece of paper I had which showed an advertisement for Paris and vintage style. I added bits and pieces from napkins which related to France. I also added some stamps and stenciling. And then I had this cardboard fleur-de-lis, and I added it after I covered it in angel dust, so it has a little bit of shimmer and shine. And that brings me to the page which had the little insert. Now that day I felt like painting, so I used all my watercolors. There's a lot of drippage going on, and I made a very simple painting. There is some stamping and stenciling and some splatter as well. I also added some of this very thin metallic foil to the page to give it a bit of a distressed look. So yeah, I painted this very simple landscape with the well, and of course I had to have a water bearer as well and some palm trees. Now this particular design is something I did when I was very young, and my mom used to have a picture I drew for her on her wall for many years. So I thought it was worth duplicating one more time. And as you can see, when the page closes this way, it complements the rock, and the same on the side. And the insert really has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the page. I had a friend over who was watching me. She dared me to just use eyes from a magazine. So here it is. It's just a simple collage of eyes. It's kind of cool, and it lives right here in the middle for whatever reason. And the next page here is a little pop-up. I had this pretty image for quite a while, and I was always hesitant to use it on one of my other art journal pages, but here I could leave the picture pretty much intact. I attached it by making a little hinge and using double-sided tape. I colored the background in these earthen colors as a sponge, a little bit of decorating on the side, and these are some upholstery trims, and they fit so nicely in the color, and yeah, there she is. And here on this page again I used some wrapping paper. I enhanced it a little bit with some metallic paints. I attached this metal piece with a paper brad, and it holds closed this die-cut butterfly. Now I had this die-cut too for a long time. It was not colored, and so I added all the color using my metallic paints, some rub-on metallic foil, and did some detailing on it. And when it closes, this will hold it in place. There's a little glimmer and shine on the background as well. Next, the page I cut in the middle in half. Well, I don't know what this guy is doing here, but he just came to live on this page blowing his bubble. I sealed this with glossy accent. I added some fibers. There's a little bit of blending going on, and I attached another piece of the pages I removed from the book. As you can see, the writing is going this way, not the way it usually would go. Some bubbles and so on, pretty simple. The background too, very simple. Again, some images from a magazine. I added some distressing and stamping on the edges. a tiny set of wings, and a little lace. And here I did one of my faces on a separate piece of paper and then attached it to a colored background, a little bit of stenciling. I added some cheesecloth and a ribbon just to finish up the page here. And that brings me to the page with the window. As you remember, I had 2 pages in which I cut a hole, and you can of course insert all kinds of different things, plastic or screen or some lace. I opted to use this doily here, and when it lays down this way you can see there's a little fellow peeking through from the other side. And this page was a mixed media page with bits and pieces of sheet music, paper, some stenciling. I used some of the glitter stencil paste, a lot of outlining. Then I found this fun image of the geisha and this big frame, and I added it together so she would peek outside the frame. There's some lace here in the background. And when I close the page, a little ribbon here, she peeks through it on this side. And of course here's my little fellow, a chameleon. And this was an advertisement from a paint company. So I printed out their name. I added some stenciling of the bricks. I hand painted these bricks. There are also some stencil of some plant where I repeated the pretty color from this image. It has a little zigzag ribbon going up. More stenciling in the background. A little bit of 3D dots here in the right color. And onward to the next page. Here I painted a simple little mermaid. I used my Neocolor 2 on this, and I protected it with a little piece of parchment paper here, which I just glued to the book, because on the next page I used alcohol inks, and that can get a little messy sometimes. After they were dry, I cut out these houses from one of the book sheets I removed from here, and then just glued them down, shaded them, and so on. Now when I was doing this mermaid, I was reminded that so many stories have the idea that the mermaid one day wants to live on land. And I thought if that ever would come true, she would surely want to take some of her friends with her. So I created this page. I hope you can see it in its entirety. It's pretty long. These are images taken from a napkin. These are from a magazine. More napkin images. And well, there she is with all her friends. And of course the background has a lot of texture. I use bits and pieces of paper, lots of paint and splatter and so on. So there is the long page. The next page was definitely just abstract. I just enjoyed playing with all the colors and the different shades. I used my glimmer mist, I used my primary pigment powders, I used my credit card for some lines here and then a string, and I filled in some of the areas with liquid pearls and liquid dots and so on. So there's this one. And that brings me pretty much to the last page. And here I used some handmade paper. It came in different tones of green. I made a weave outside the book and cut it to size and then glued it down to this page. I also added all kinds of doodles on the edges. I did some distressing on it. And then I glued down this lace fleur-de-lis. It has some metallic rub on it. A pretty simple page. And here's the other end of the bookmark, again with some pretty beads at the end. And that brings me to the last page, the back book cover. And here is the pocket. And I added this image, which is a napkin ironed onto a book page. I always loved the color, and it had this funny shape and was a perfect thing to use for this pocket. I created also another tag, a fabric tag. As you can see, it has some buttons on it too. Different strings and lace, and again some crazy stitching done on my machine. And here on the edge of the pocket I used this little ribbon, which is made to look like artificial leather. And that brings me to the end of my book. Alright, Well, I really hope you enjoyed this flip through. I hope it gave you some inspiration and new ideas to maybe tackle an altered book like this. I had really a lot of fun creating this. And again, if you need extra tips and ideas, don't forget to check out Lori Marie's channel. The link to her channel will be below in my description box as well. Thank you so much for coming. See you soon again. Bye bye for now.